Will Buckley stepped onto the jet bridge like a man trying to outrun his own thoughts. His jaw was tight, his shoulders stiff, and his carry-on looked like it had absorbed every ounce of anger he refused to say out loud. Hours earlier, he'd watched a deal worth hundreds of millions fall apart. His private jet grounded unexpectedly, his team scrambling for answers, and now, him, boarding a commercial flight filled with people who had no idea that the usually unshakable billionaire was one wrong breath away from losing control. The moment he entered first class, he didn't greet a soul. Just dropped into seat 3A, shut his eyes, and exhaled through clenched teeth. He never liked showing frustration in public, but today had dragged him past the limits of what he could hide. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin boarding in just a moment. The overhead announcement cut off his thoughts. He rubbed his temples, trying to settle the pounding in his chest. The last 2 years hadn't been gentle either. Not after the divorce. Not after losing the only woman he ever truly wanted. But this wasn't the time to think about Sally. He'd spent months training himself not to say her name in his mind. Too late. It still slipped through. He turned toward the window, forcing his breathing steady. That was when he heard it. A voice he knew instantly. A voice he would know anywhere. "Excuse me. Sorry, sweetie. Let me fix your backpack. Hold Mommy's hand." Will's eyes snapped open. No way. It couldn't be. That voice didn't just belong to a memory. It belonged to her. He turned his head slowly, terrified he was imagining it. But he wasn't. Walking down the aisle, slightly breathless, her carry-on slipping off her shoulder, was Sally. His ex-wife, the woman he once built dreams with, then lost in the most painful way possible. His heart dropped. She hadn't seen him yet. She was too busy juggling a diaper bag, a set of crayons, and Will froze. 2 toddlers. 2 tiny little girls, both holding onto her hands. Twins. His breath caught. His body went completely still. The girls were maybe 2, maybe a little older. Curly hair, round cheeks, bright expressions. But one of them looked up, and he stopped breathing entirely. Blue eyes. The exact shade he saw in the mirror every morning. Not similar, not close. Exact. His pulse slammed in his ears. His anger at the world evaporated, replaced by something sharper, deeper, more disorienting than anything he'd felt in years. He couldn't look away. Sally lifted one twin into the seat just across the aisle, 3B. Fate had a cruel sense of humor. The little girl with blue eyes blinked at him again, curious and innocent, unaware she had just detonated the center of his world. Will gripped the armrest as an ice-cold realization tore through him. No, it can't be. He would have known. She would have told him. Unless... Sally finally looked up. Her gaze collided with his. Time didn't slow. It slammed to a dead stop. Her lips parted in shock. His breath vanished. The flight crew continued giving directions. Passengers squeezed down the aisle. Someone dropped a suitcase behind them. But none of it mattered. For the first time in 2 years, Will and Sally stared at each other, except now she wasn't alone. 2 daughters sat beside her, 2 daughters who could easily be his. His throat tightened. The room felt smaller. His heartbeat pounded so hard he felt it in his palm. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't chance. This was a revelation hitting him at 30,000 feet before the plane even left the ground. His world didn't tilt. It cracked. Because in one impossible moment, he understood something he never expected when he boarded the flight furious. He might be a father. Bestie. This is your hook. This is your first climax. This is the moment that makes the viewer lean in and refuse to leave. For a moment, Will forgot where he was. Forgot the noise. Forgot the seatbelt sign chiming overhead. All he could process was the sight of Sally, the twins, and the questions that attacked him faster than breath could form. But he wasn't the only one with questions. There was someone watching this unfold. The viewer. And Bestie, this is where the story reaches into their chest. Because who hasn't lived through a moment that made them pause and think, what did I lose because of pride? Did I walk away too early? Did love end? Or did life just get loud? What truth would destroy me if it came out years later? Sally finally settled the girls, but her hands were shaking. She fixed their seatbelts, smoothed their shirts, tried to act composed. But the tremor in her breath revealed everything she didn't say. And viewers feel that, because everyone has carried a pain they never admitted. Everyone has survived a goodbye they weren't ready for. Everyone has a person whose absence still echoes a little too loudly. Many people watch storytelling channels because they're living their own battles quietly, their own broken connections, their own regrets they pretend not to feel. So when Will stared at those twins, trembling with the weight of possibilities, it triggered something universal, the fear of finding out the truth too late. Maybe the viewers have walked away from someone they once loved. Maybe they've avoided a conversation that could have changed everything. Maybe they've wondered what life would look like if they'd fought a little harder, or forgiven a little sooner. Life is full of moments you wish you could rewind. Moments where one choice, one conversation, could have saved everything. And right now, sitting across from two little girls who looked like pieces of his own reflection, Will was living the nightmare so many people carry secretly. What if the biggest mistake of your life wasn't the breakup, but what the breakup cost you? The worst part, you never see the consequences until they show up right in front of you. Sometimes on a random day, on a random flight, in a random aisle seat, when your guard is down and your past walks in wearing toddler shoes. Will swallowed hard, chest tight, shaking inside in ways he hadn't felt since the divorce. And as viewers listen, they begin to ask themselves, what would I have done differently? Who did I lose that I should have held on to? Who did I hurt because I didn't know how to stay? What truth is waiting to confront me someday? That's the power of this moment. This hook isn't just Will's story. It nudges every viewer to face their own. Will tried to look away, but his eyes kept finding those blue ones staring back at him. The little girl blinked slowly, studying him with the kind of innocence that made his throat tighten. She wasn't scared or shy. She looked curious, almost familiar, as if her heart recognized him before her mind could. The plane door shut. The flight attendants secured the cabin. Engines hummed beneath them. Will's pulse wouldn't slow. Sally finally settled into her seat. From across the aisle, she looked composed, but her eyes betrayed the storm. She didn't speak. She avoided looking at him, focusing instead on calming the twins. "Mommy, juice," one whispered. "Mommy, up," the other murmured. Her hands trembled lightly as she reached into her bag. She was trying to keep everything together, but Will could see the strain. He knew her tells, the soft exhale, the tightening in her jaw, the way her shoulders rose when she was overwhelmed. The plane began to taxi. Will gripped the armrest again, but not from fear. From everything he didn't know how to ask. A child with his eyes. 2 years without contact. A divorce full of silence and heartbreak. None of it made sense. The announcements started. Seatbelts clicked. Passengers murmured. Will kept watching her. Sally kept pretending not to see him. Tension hung between them. Heavy, sharp, unavoidable. The plane lifted from the ground. At first, everything felt normal, smooth, predictable, until it wasn't. A sudden jolt ripped through the cabin. Not gentle, not small. A violent drop that made several passengers gasp. Sally's hand flew to the armrest. One twin whimpered. The other began to cry. Will's instincts reacted faster than his thoughts. Sally, another drop hit. The kind that rattled overhead bins and made hearts race. Sally squeezed her eyes shut, chest rising unevenly. She'd always hated turbulence. Her fear of flying was something Will used to soothe with whispered promises and steady hands. Before he could stop himself, before pride could interfere, before the past could argue back, Will reached across the aisle and grabbed her hand. Her fingers closed around his instantly, like memory, like reflex, like a part of her had been waiting for comfort she didn't dare ask for. The twin with blue eyes stopped crying. She stared at their joined hands, then stared up at Will, and lifted her arms toward him. The gesture hit him like lightning, not a reach for a stranger, not a reach for entertainment, a reach with trust, a reach with familiarity, a reach a child gives a parent. Sally's breath caught. Will's grip tightened. The turbulence shook the cabin again. And then it happened. The moment that broke him open. The little girl, barely 2 years old, pointed at him with her tiny finger, eyes full of certainty, and said, "Daddy." The world didn't just fall silent. Will's heart stopped. Sally's face drained of color. A tear slid down her cheek before she could hide it. Passengers turned in confusion. But Will, he couldn't hear anything. Just that one word echoing through every part of him. Daddy? He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He didn't blink. Because at 30,000 feet, in the middle of turbulence and old wounds, a child he didn't know existed had just called him the title he never got the chance to earn. This was no coincidence, no harmless mistake, no random mix-up. This was truth, forcing its way into the open. This was the second climax of the hook. And it was only the beginning. Will didn't answer right away. He couldn't. His body felt frozen, as if the truth had wrapped itself around his chest and refused to let go. The turbulence eased, but inside him everything shook harder. Daddy? The little girl repeated it softly, this time leaning toward the aisle as if she expected him to open his arms. Will's breath trembled. Sally finally found her voice. Sweetheart. She whispered, her voice thin, breaking at the edges. Sit back for Mummy. But the toddler didn't move. Her tiny hands stayed outstretched, waiting for a man she shouldn't have recognized, yet somehow did. Will kept staring, unable to form a single word. His mind replayed every second of the last 2 years. The arguments before the divorce, the distance, the heartbreak, the unanswered questions, the silence, the pieces he thought he had moved on from, but he hadn't moved on. Not from Sally, not from the future they once talked about, not from the idea of a family he believed he'd lost forever. And now, 2 identical little girls were sitting less than 4 feet away, girls who shared his features, girls Sally had kept hidden, girls who could very well be his daughters. Will swallowed hard, pain and disbelief clashing inside him. It didn't matter how powerful he was. It didn't matter how much money he had. It didn't matter how many deals he closed or buildings carried his name. Nothing could have prepared him for this moment. A single word from a toddler had undone years of hardened emotion, and it raised a question no one could ignore. A question every viewer felt in their chest. What would you do? If you discovered you were a parent 30,000 feet in the air, would you panic? Would you deny it? Would you demand answers? Would you break? Would you fight to earn the title you never knew you lost? Life doesn't always give warnings. Sometimes it hands you truth at cruising altitude, with no exit door, no escape, and no way to pretend you're okay. Will didn't know it yet, but this moment, this single, unexpected encounter, was about to change everything he believed about love, family, forgiveness, and himself. And bestie, before the story climbs deeper, if you're watching this right now, tap like, drop a comment saying second chance, because it helps YouTube share this story with more people who might need it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Now buckle in, because this flight, it's only just taking off. Will Buckley had endured bad days before, days where the stock market dipped, days where partners backed out, days where the weight of leadership felt like lifting concrete with bare hands. But this day demanded a new category. It began with a deal that collapsed just minutes before signatures were locked in. A 2-year negotiation, a global partnership, a projected revenue spike worth billions, gone. A malfunction grounded his private jet. The pilot apologized. The ground crew scrambled. A storm delayed everything further. His team couldn't find another charter in time. His meeting in San Francisco was immovable. Investors waited. Reporters hovered. Competitors watched like hawks. And so, for the first time in years, the billionaire found himself shuffling through the Atlanta airport among regular passengers. Jaw tight, mind racing, carrying the crushing sense that his entire empire had slipped an inch out of his control. He hated that feeling. Will moved through TSA with the posture of a man who might explode if someone breathed incorrectly near him. His assistant texted non-stop updates. His lawyer sent messages he didn't want to read. And his mother, always opinionated, always cold, sent a voicemail he refused to open. Everything in him burned. First class on Flight 628 is now boarding. Good. He needed to sit, breathe, recover whatever sanity the morning had ripped apart. Boarding the plane, Will barely acknowledged the flight attendant greeting him. His eyes were tense, his movements stiff. He dropped into seat 3A, loosened his tie, and pressed his fingers to his forehead. The ache there felt carved into bone. He replayed the failed deal in his head, running through every point of collapse. Anything to make sense of what had happened. Anything to regain control. Anything to keep from thinking about the woman he still loved more than he ever admitted. But Sally's name pushed into his mind anyway. He cursed under his breath and shut his eyes. No, not today. He had spent 2 years training himself to ignore the memories. 2 years avoiding places that reminded him of her. 2 years pretending divorce didn't tear something essential out of him. He inhaled slowly, exhaled sharply. He just needed this flight to be quiet, neutral, forgettable. Instead, it became the flight that ruined every wall he built. The boarding line grew louder. People shuffled down the aisle, bags knocked armrests, children chattered. Will ignored it all, until he heard a familiar tone. "Sweetheart, hold Mommy's hand. No running." His eyes snapped open. His heart slammed against his ribs. No, not possible. Not today. The airport was huge. Thousands of passengers. The odds were microscopic. But the universe didn't follow odds when lessons needed to be taught. He turned his head slowly. And there she was. Sally. His ex-wife. The woman he hadn't seen in 2 long years. She walked down the aisle with her backpack slipping off her shoulder, her curls pulled into a low bun. Her eyes focused on 2 tiny girls who were trying to climb into first class like they owned it. Twins. 2 little girls. Will's lungs collapsed. One girl had soft brown curls, warm brown eyes, and chubby cheeks rosy from excitement. The other, God help him, had the exact blue eyes he saw in the mirror every day. A trembling breath slipped out of him. His mind scrambled to make sense of the scene. He tried to swallow but couldn't. His heart flipped so hard he felt dizzy. Sally didn't see him at first. She was busy lifting one twin into seat 3 billions as the other clung to her leg. "Mommy, snack," the brown-eyed one whispered. "Soon, baby," Sally murmured. Her voice was the same, gentle, warm, grounding, a tone that used to settle him after impossible days. Will stared at her, unable to blink. The twins settled. Sally finally looked up. Their eyes locked. Her breath hitched. His chest constricted. The air thickened around them. 2 years of silence, erased in one glance. The blue-eyed toddler studied Will with surprising focus, tilting her head slightly, curious, innocent, trusting. Will wasn't ready for what he felt. Not shock, not disbelief. Something deeper, recognition. He recognized himself in her. His features, his expression, his eyes. Panic flashed through him. His pulse hammered so loudly he could barely hear the safety demonstration beginning overhead. No, she would have told me. She had to tell me. She wouldn't keep something this big from me, right? The toddler blinked at him, her expression softening as if she sensed something in him, a connection she didn't understand. Will's throat tightened painfully. He knew. Deep inside, he knew. And the truth terrified him. The plane filled quickly, but the space between Will and Sally felt like its own universe. Quiet, charged, impossible to ignore. Sally looked away first, focusing on settling the twins again, but her movements were stiff, her breathing uneven. She adjusted blankets they didn't need, aligned crayons they weren't using. Her hands shook. She was rattled, just like him. 2 years without speaking, and suddenly here they were, trapped across an aisle with nowhere to run. Will swallowed hard, trying to center himself. But the memories fought him. Arguments, tears, sleepless nights, the moment she walked out, the crushing silence after the divorce. Everything he'd buried, deep. He studied her quietly. Sally looked older, not in age but in experience, stronger, softer in some ways, guarded in others. There were new shadows under her eyes, signs of nights she clearly didn't sleep enough. She held herself differently now, steadier, more protective, like someone who'd carried weight alone. And the twins, he couldn't stop staring at them. They shared the same curls Sally had as a toddler, but their eyes, one brown, one blue, one hers, one unmistakably his. They fidgeted with their toy animals, kicking their tiny feet against the seat, oblivious to the emotional storm swirling around them. Sally finally looked back up. Her eyes were glossy. She knew that he knew, but neither had the courage to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, please prepare for takeoff." The announcement cut the silence like a blade. Sally's breath quickened. She always hated takeoff. He remembered that vividly. Will clenched the armrest, not from fear of flying, from the tension of wanting to speak, but knowing that one wrong word could shatter the fragile moment. The plane started forward. Sally closed her eyes. One twin held onto her sleeve. The other, blue eyes still fixed on Will, leaned slightly into the aisle as if drawn to him. He felt the pull, too. Something inside him cracked open. Something tender and fierce and terrifying. The distance between them felt too small for strangers, too large for family. 2 years had changed them. 2 years had separated them. 2 years had built walls neither intended to build, but one flight had forced everything back into the same space, and the tension gripped them both like a truth refusing to be ignored. The plane lifted smoothly. At first, Will gripped the armrest. Sally swallowed hard. The twins clung to her hands. Then turbulence hit, sudden, sharp, the kind that made bags shift overhead and passengers exhale nervously. Sally tensed instantly. Her eyelashes fluttered with fear. Her shoulders rose. Her hands tightened around the twins. Will knew this version of her, the one who fought panic with every shaky breath. The one he used to comfort with whispered reassurance and gentle touch. Another jolt rattled the cabin. One twin whimpered. The other started crying. Sally tried soothing them, but her fear made her voice unsteady. Will reacted before thinking. "Sally." Another drop hit the cabin. She gasped, sharply. Not a dramatic sound. A vulnerable one. Will's instincts took over. He reached across the aisle and held her hand. Her fingers closed around his instantly, like reflex, like memory, like muscle trained by years of love. She didn't pull away. He didn't let go. The warmth of her skin, the way her breath steadied slightly, the soft squeeze she gave him without thinking, it all hit him harder than the turbulence. Will felt something stir in his chest, something he'd forced himself to kill, but it rose anyway. Something unspoken, unfinished, unresolved. The years hadn't frozen them. They'd merely buried everything too deep, and the moment their hands touched, buried things pushed to the surface. The plane shook again, and Sally instinctively leaned forward, not toward the aisle but toward him. Will looked at her gently, something soft filling his stare without his permission. "We're okay," he said quietly. A familiar phrase, one he hadn't spoken to her in far too long. Sally squeezed his hand again, her eyes glossy before she looked away. For a few seconds, they weren't exes. They weren't broken. They weren't estranged. They were two people who once loved each other enough to plan forever, and were now pretending they hadn't lost it. Once the turbulence softened, Sally exhaled shakily, trying to calm herself. The twins rested their heads on her arms, still uneasy, still watching her closely. But the blue-eyed toddler, she kept her gaze locked on Will. He offered a timid smile, soft, unsure, gentle. Her eyes widened, her little mouth curved upward, and she stretched her arms toward him again, not randomly, not playfully, with intention, with trust, with recognition that went beyond logic. "Up," she whispered. Will's heart thudded painfully. Sally froze. The other twin looked at him too, tilting her head in curiosity. Twins understood things silently. One followed emotional cues the other felt. Both were drawn to him. Will swallowed hard, struggling to breathe as the truth pressed on him from every direction. He wasn't imagining this. He wasn't overstressed. He wasn't reading too much into coincidence. Something was connecting them. Something real, something he'd been denied, something he suddenly wanted more than anything he'd ever built or owned. Sally's lips parted, her expression falling with guilt, fear, and something deeper, acceptance. Will's voice cracked as he whispered, "Are they?" Sally didn't answer. She couldn't answer. Her eyes said everything. The truth sat between them, heavy, unavoidable, powerful. The flight attendant walked by at that exact moment, breaking the tension. "Sir, once we reach cruising altitude, I can help move your seat if you'd prefer more privacy." Will didn't look up. His eyes stayed locked on the toddler, reaching for him. Reaching for her father. For the first time, he didn't deny it. He didn't question it. He felt it. This was his child. Maybe both. His throat tightened. His heartbeat stuttered. His world shifted. Chapter 1 ended with one overwhelming realization. His past hadn't just returned. It had been sitting across the aisle, waiting for him to claim it. Before we continue, don't forget to like this video, drop a comment saying I'm ready for more, and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this powerful story. Your support helps this channel grow and keeps these stories alive. The moment the seatbelt sign turned off, Sally unbuckled with a shaky breath, whispering to the twins, "Mommy will be right back, okay? Stay here. Don't move." Both girls nodded, trusting her completely. The blue-eyed one clutched her stuffed bear. The brown-eyed one swung her little feet nervously. They sensed something was happening, even if they didn't understand what it meant. Will stood at the same time Sally did. They didn't speak. They didn't argue. They simply walked, like gravity was pulling them into the narrow galley behind the first-class cabin. The curtain closed behind them. Silence pressed in. Sally kept her back to him at first, gripping the counter for support as the jet hummed beneath their feet. Will studied her quietly, absorbing the curve of her shoulders, the rise and fall of her breath, the way she held herself like someone used to carrying weight alone. "Sally," he finally said. She flinched. Slowly she turned around, eyes already glossy. Seeing her up close for the first time in 2 years hit him harder than turbulence ever could. She looked exhausted. Beautiful, but exhausted. Like someone who had run a marathon while pretending she hadn't. "Why are you here, Will?" she whispered. He exhaled, shaking his head. "My jet grounded. They forced me onto a commercial flight. I didn't know. I had no idea you'd be—" "That's not what I meant." Her voice cracked. "Why here? Why now? Why this plane? Why today?" Her questions weren't accusations. They were fear wearing a thin mask. Will stepped closer, his voice low, steady. "I'm not here to fight. I swear, I'm not." Her jaw tightened. "Then, what do you want?" He swallowed hard. "Answers," he admitted quietly. "And the truth." Sally closed her eyes, shoulders trembling. "Will, please." He moved one step closer, slow, careful, as if approaching something fragile. "You owe me that much, Sally," he whispered. Not with anger, but with heartbreak. "You owe me the truth. At least once." Her breath shook. "Will." Everything was so complicated back then. So complicated, he echoed softly. "But not complicated enough to justify what I'm thinking right now." A tear escaped her eye before she could stop it. Will's expression broke. Seeing her cry still affected him in ways he wished it didn't. "Sally," he said gently, "I'm not angry. I'm scared. I'm confused, and I'm begging you. Don't make me guess." Her voice wavered. "You think I wanted it like this? Then tell me why it is like this." She pressed a hand to her forehead, inhaling shakily. "You left," Will said softly. "You walked out. I tried to chase you. I tried to talk. You signed the papers without a word. And now I'm staring at 2 little girls who look—" His voice cracked. Sally looked away, fighting emotion. Will tried again. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. "I deserve to know. Don't you think I should have been there? Don't you think I should have held them? Don't you think I should have had the chance to be their father from day one?" Sally covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking quietly. He softened. "Sally," he said gently, "talk to me. Please, don't run again." She looked at him with trembling eyes. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered. "Then why did you?" His tone wasn't harsh. It was broken. "Why did you walk away without giving me a chance?" Her voice barely made it out. "Because I didn't know how to stay." Silence hit them both. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself. "You and I were falling apart, Will. Everything felt heavy. Everything felt wrong. And when I found out I was pregnant—" She swallowed hard. "I panicked. I froze. I didn't trust myself to make the right choice. I didn't trust you to stay present. And I didn't want to bring life into chaos." He closed his eyes in pain. Sally continued, her voice small. "I kept telling myself, I'd call you once things were calm, once I figured out how to breathe again, once I felt strong enough, but the longer I waited, the harder it became. Shame grew, fear grew, and suddenly, 2 years passed. Will rubbed his face, overwhelmed. Sally, you should have trusted me. She looked up, tears falling. I couldn't trust myself, Will, and I broke us long before the divorce. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Will felt his heart tear open. Hearing her apologize, finally, hurt more than the silence she left him with. He reached for the counter behind him to steady himself, breathing unevenly. Do you know what hurt the most? He whispered, not losing the marriage, but losing you without understanding why. Her chin quivered. And now, he added, voice trembling, I don't even know what I'm looking at anymore. I don't know how to process any of this. Sally wiped her tears, but more followed. Then let me tell you everything, she whispered. No more hiding, no more fear. Sally kept her hands braced against the counter, as though the truth she was about to release needed physical anchoring. The hum of the plane filled the narrow galley, but to Will, everything felt suspended. The air, his breath, the space between them. She didn't look ready. She didn't look steady, but she looked done running. Her voice trembled as she finally whispered, They're yours. Will didn't move. He didn't gasp. He didn't step back. He didn't collapse. He stood completely still, as if one wrong breath would shatter the fragile structure of this moment. My daughters, he said softly, the words tasting foreign yet painfully familiar. They're my daughters. Sally nodded slowly. A tear slipped from the corner of her eye and fell onto her shaking fingers. She didn't wipe it. She didn't hide it. She let it fall, because hiding was what created this entire mess to begin with. I should have told you, she whispered. I know that, I know. But back then, everything felt impossible. Will's throat tightened. You left before you even gave me a chance to understand. Sally's eyes lifted, guilty, vulnerable, carrying a weight he didn't yet know. You think I didn't want to stay? She asked, voice cracking. You think I walked out because it was easy? Will, I was drowning. He swallowed. We were both drowning. We should have reached for each other. She shook her head. You weren't reachable. Silence hit him like a physical blow. Her words weren't an attack. They were truth, wrapped in exhaustion. I was scared, Sally admitted. I was pregnant, emotional, confused. And every time I tried to tell you something important, you were in a meeting, or on a call, or traveling, or distracted by work. Every conversation felt like an interruption. His chest ached at her honesty. And then, she continued softly, your mother came to see me. Will stiffened. Every muscle froze solid. Sally watched him carefully. She told me your family wasn't ready for this, that a baby would complicate things. She said you were under pressure and couldn't handle anything unexpected. His stomach turned. You believed her? No, she whispered. I believed the version of you I kept seeing every day. The tired man, the distant husband, the one who never looked up anymore. Will pressed a palm to the nearest wall, steadying himself. I was wrong to leave without telling you, she said. I was wrong to think I could handle pregnancy and birth alone. But Will, her voice quivered. Every time I thought about calling you, I remembered how disconnected we were, how cold you became, how small I felt whenever I asked for something. He shut his eyes, pain rippling through him. I wasn't cold, he said quietly. I was lost, trying to fix things the wrong way. I thought working harder would protect us. It didn't, she whispered. I know. Sally wiped a tear with the back of her hand, her voice barely above a breath. I was ashamed. I felt like a failure, as a wife, as a parent-to-be. I didn't want you to see me weak, and when the twins came early, everything spiraled. I was overwhelmed, exhausted, terrified, and stubborn. I convinced myself that calling you would just make everything worse. Will's chest constricted. You robbed me of their birth, he whispered, not with anger, but heartbreak. Sally flinched, tears gathering immediately. I know, she cried. I told myself I'd make it up someday. I told myself I'd call once I figured things out. But the days kept passing, then months, then a year, and by the time I realized how wrong I was, I didn't know how to reach out anymore. Will ran a hand through his hair, pacing a short, frantic line in the small galley. "You should have told me," he said again, this time with more pain than volume. "You should have trusted me. You should have given me the chance to change." Sally choked out, "I was scared you'd hate me." He froze. Hate? He had spent 2 years missing her so deeply it felt like losing breath. "You think I hated you?" he asked, stunned. "I didn't know what you felt anymore," she said. "We weren't us. We were strangers living in the same house. I didn't trust the marriage. I didn't trust myself. And I didn't think you'd want a baby when you couldn't even look at me without stress in your eyes." Will blinked rapidly, emotions rushing through him so fast he could barely process them. "I wasn't stressed at you," he said softly. "I was stressed because I knew I was losing you and didn't know how to stop it." Sally's lips parted. Her expression crumbled. Will stepped closer, carefully, until they stood a foot apart, 2 broken hearts finally facing the debris they never cleaned up. "What happened to us?" he whispered, voice shaking. Sally pressed a trembling hand over her chest. "Life happened," she said. "Pressure happened. Pride happened. We forgot how to communicate. I forgot how to fight for us, and I became a mother before I learned how to be brave." Her admission fractured something in him. She wasn't excusing herself. She wasn't blaming him. She was telling him the truth she carried alone for far too long. And Will felt every word. His daughters, born without him, growing without him, living without him, because 2 people who once planned forever forgot how to be vulnerable with each other. He inhaled shakily. "Sally," he whispered, "you should have told me from the moment you knew." She nodded weakly. "I know." He held her gaze. "You should have trusted me enough to let me choose." Another tear fell. "I know, Will. I know." Her voice crumbled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The apology he never got. The apology he never knew he needed. The apology that cracked him open from the inside out. Will exhaled shakily, not out of anger, but grief, and for the first time since the divorce, Sally didn't look like the woman who left him. She looked like the woman who once loved him enough to build a life with him, and the woman who feared she wasn't enough to keep it. Will breaks down over lost time, begs for chance to know them. The galley felt too quiet after her apology, like even the engines outside lowered themselves to listen. Will leaned back against the small counter, rubbing a palm across his jaw. He had spent 2 years thinking anger would be the loudest feeling if this moment ever came. But standing here, looking at her, all he felt was grief, not rage, not fury, just the crushing weight of what he missed. "How old are they now?" he whispered. 18 months, Sally answered gently. His breath hitched. "I missed their first words." "Yes, their first steps." Sally's eyes filled. They were holding onto the couch, wobbling. "It was so cute." He swallowed hard. "I wasn't there." "No," she whispered. "You weren't." It was the truth. A painful truth. Not a punishment, just reality. He ran both hands through his hair, pacing once, then twice, stopping only when his voice finally found its way out. "I would have been a good father," he said, voice cracking. "I wasn't perfect. God knows I wasn't perfect. But I would have been there, Sally. You should have given me the chance." Her face broke. "I know. You should have let me hold them," he whispered. "Feed them, protect them, love them." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You should have let me see them take their first breath." His voice broke completely. "I didn't get to name them. I didn't get to sign anything. I didn't get to cut the cord. I didn't get to hear the doctor say they were healthy. I didn't get to be their dad when it mattered most." He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking, as years of silent heartbreak finally surfaced. Sally stepped forward instinctively, but stopped herself, gripping her own wrist as if reminding herself she had no right to comfort him. "I hurt you," she whispered. "I hurt you in ways I can't undo." Will lowered his hands, eyes red, voice quiet but firm. "I can't get those moments back. But I need the rest of them. I need every moment forward. I need to know my daughters." Sally blinked, stunned by the raw sincerity in his voice. "I'm not asking to replace you," Will continued. "I'm not asking for control or custody or any of the things people fight over. I'm begging for a chance to be in their lives, to learn how to be their father, to learn what they like, what they hate, what makes them laugh, what helps them sleep. He took a step toward her, but not aggressively, desperately. I want to know their favorite snacks, the toy they won't let go of, which one cries harder when she's sick, whether they prefer being rocked or bounced. I want to hear the little sounds they make. I want to know the difference between their cries. His voice dropped. I want to memorize them. Sally pressed both hands over her mouth, sobbing quietly. I lost them before I even knew them, he said. Please, don't take anything else away from me. Sally cried harder, shaking her head. I'm not trying to take anything from you anymore. I swear. Will wiped his eyes. I need you to let me in, he whispered. Even if it's slow, even if it's awkward, even if we argue along the way. I need you to trust me enough to try. Her voice was fragile. What if we mess it up again? Then we learn, Will said. We don't run. We learn. The words landed deeper than he realized. She wasn't the only one who ran. He ran too, into work, into silence, into avoidance. But standing here, he wasn't running. And for the first time in 2 years, neither was she. Sally leaned against the counter, wiping tears with her sleeve. When she finally looked up, something had changed, not her sadness, but her resolve. We need rules, she whispered. Not to shut you out, to protect the girls. Will nodded. Tell me. First, she said, voice steadier, I need you to show up. Not just emotionally, physically. I can't do disappearing. Not even once. I won't, Will replied without hesitation. Not again. Second, we need to keep communication open. No more going quiet when things get uncomfortable. No more guessing what the other person feels. I agree. Third, she hesitated. Their routine matters. They nap twice a day, eat at specific times, and get overwhelmed easily. If you want to be involved, it has to be in ways that support their structure. That's not a problem, Will said. Tell me what to follow, and I will. Her cheeks tightened with emotion. Fourth, she continued, we are not fixing us until we fix the parenting part first. I'm not ready for anything romantic. Not yet. Will took that hit quietly. He didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He didn't push. I respect that, he said softly. I'm not asking for us back. I'm asking for my daughters. Sally's expression softened. And fifth, if we do this, we do it with honesty. Every fear, every mistake, every insecurity. No secrets, no silence. Will exhaled deeply. I can do that. Can you? She asked, searching him. Yes, he said without blinking. I have more regrets than accomplishments at this point. I'm done pretending I'm fine. She stared at him for a long moment. You've changed, she whispered. Lost as that. Her throat tightened again. What about your company? She asked. Your life? The travel? The stress? Being a parent means being present. I'll make space, he said simply. How? I'll resign if I have to. She froze. Will. I'm serious. Nothing is more important than them. Her lips parted at the sincerity. He meant it. He really meant it. Let's not jump that far yet, she said softly. Just start small. One step at a time. He nodded. Tell me the first step. Sally inhaled shakily. Meeting them. Really meeting them. Not across the aisle, not during turbulence, but in a calm moment where they can see your face and feel your presence. A tiny, hopeful ache spread across Will's chest. When? He asked. She glanced toward the cabin, toward the 2 toddler girls sitting unaware of the emotional earthquake happening feet away. After we land, Will's breath caught. Today. Yes, she said. Today. He closed his eyes, overwhelmed. His life, broken. His marriage, shattered. His career, crumbling. But this was the first step towards something worth repairing. They walked back toward the seating area slowly, their steps eerily, synchronized, like the moment had gently recalibrated their paths. The aisle seemed shorter, the lights warmer, the tension less jagged. Will held his breath as the twins came into view again, tiny legs kicking, soft curls bouncing, big curious eyes scanning the cabin. Sally paused beside their row and whispered, Ready? No. Yes. Maybe. Absolutely. Will nodded anyway. Sally crouched beside the girls. Babies, someone wants to say hi. Both toddlers looked up. One blinked. The other smiled with 3 tiny teeth. Will's knees weakened. Sally lifted the girl with the blue eyes, the one who mirrored him. The little one studied Will with the seriousness of a scientist, then reached a chubby hand toward his shirt collar and grabbed it. Will's breath shattered. "She likes you," Sally said softly. The little girl leaned her forehead gently against Will's chest. He froze. He didn't dare move. He didn't dare breathe too loudly. His daughter, his actual daughter, rested against him as naturally as if she had known him her entire life. His eyes filled instantly. The second twin began fussing, hands outstretched. "She wants you too," Sally whispered. Will lifted his arms, giving the smallest nod. Sally placed the second girl into his embrace. 2 daughters, 2 tiny hearts, 2 pieces of himself he didn't know were missing until now. His voice cracked. "They're perfect." Sally wiped a tear. "They're ours." The word ours pulled something deep inside him, something buried under resentment, heartbreak, and time. He looked up at her, daughters in his arms. "Sally, thank you for giving them life." She blinked hard, startled by the gentleness she didn't expect. A silence fell, warm, fragile, full of possibility. And just when the moment reached its quiet peak, the plane jolted slightly. A ding sounded overhead. The captain announced descending turbulence, and one toddler, still in Will's arms, looked up at him, tapped his chin and said, "Dada." Not a question, a fact. Sally gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Will's entire world tilted. He held his daughters tighter, looked at Sally, and the chapter closed on the most life-shifting moment he had ever lived. Before life twisted itself into heartbreak and silence. Before the twins. Before the divorce. Before the flight that changed everything. There was Atlanta. Atlanta shaped Sally long before she ever stepped into Will's world. She grew up in a neighborhood where the aunties on porches acted like a second set of eyes, where kids learned to greet everyone with warmth, and where faith and food brought people together more tightly than any fancy celebration. Her mother worked double shifts as a nurse, always reminding her, "Kindness is currency, baby. Spend it freely but wisely." Sally grew up grounded, surrounded by a community that didn't measure success by money but by presence, who showed up when someone was sick, who brought over casseroles when a neighbor struggled, who babysat whose kids without asking for anything in return. She loved those summers when the entire block smelled like grilled chicken, kids running through sprinklers, music floating from open windows. She loved how the older folks told stories like they were passing down gold. She loved the way people checked on each other. She loved how Atlanta taught her not only to survive, but to care. That upbringing made her gentle but strong, soft but steady, warm but resilient. She carried that warmth into adulthood, the softness in her voice, the way she remembered birthdays, the way she placed value on connection. It wasn't naivety. It was intentional living. She believed people deserved empathy. She believed relationships were built, not bought. She believed showing up mattered more than showing off. Even in college, people gravitated toward her. She had this comforting aura, non-judgmental, inviting. Friends teased that she could make a stranger tell their whole life story in 10 minutes. Atlanta gave her community. Community gave her identity. Identity gave her heart. And that heart is what drew Will to her years later. But before they met, Sally already had dreams. She wanted to run a non-profit support center for youth, a place where kids like she once was could feel safe, seen and guided. She'd sit at her tiny dorm desk, sketching out programs she wished she had. Growing up, mentorship circles, after-school workshops, tutoring sessions. Her mentors encouraged her. Her mother prayed for her. Her neighborhood believed in her. Sally learned early that love is not loud. It shows itself through consistency. That value stayed with her. And it's the very thing Will fell in love with, and the very thing he stopped recognizing when work consumed him. But at the beginning, Sally was sunshine. Effortless, grounding sunshine. She just didn't know her life was about to collide with a man whose world operated on rules she had never been taught. Will's upbringing could not have been more different. He was raised in Boston's wealthiest district, where the houses looked like Museums and the people inside acted more like shareholders than parents. His family wasn't unloving, but they were structured, controlled, focused. His father ran a finance empire. His mother came from old money tradition. Their world revolved around image, achievement, and legacy. Will's childhood was quiet, formal, predictable. Birthdays were dinners with investors. Holidays were photo opportunities. Affection came in the form of high expectations. He learned early that emotions made things messy. That vulnerability made you unprofessional. That softness made you unprepared. Feelings are distractions, his father always said. So Will grew up disciplined, restrained, and brilliant, but emotionally distant. He excelled academically. He followed instructions. He represented the family well at charity events, galas, political fundraisers, and the private school circles his parents curated. But he didn't learn how to hug without stiffening. He didn't learn how to comfort without calculation. He didn't learn how to ask for help without shame. His mother rarely raised her voice, but her expectations hit harder than any shout. She wanted a son who was polished, composed, respected, and ready to inherit everything the family built. Will internalized all of it. Success became his language. Work became his identity. Achievement became his self-worth. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't arrogant. He was simply conditioned to survive through performance. His childhood taught him many things. Replace emotions with logic. Fix problems with strategy. Lead with control. Protect the family brand. Never show weakness. It made him strong and fragile. It prepared him for business, but not love. It created a man who could run companies but struggled to run toward people. So when he eventually met Sally, warm, open, grounded, she was oxygen in a world that demanded perfect posture and quiet feelings. She was everything his upbringing never allowed him to be, but the contrast that made them magnetic would later become the same contrast that tore them apart. The night Will met Sally felt like two worlds colliding by accident and fate. It was a winter evening in New York City, the streets alive with people heading to holiday parties and end-of-year celebrations. Inside a midtown hotel ballroom, the annual Children's Future Gala buzzed with donors, executives, non-profit workers, and performers. Sally wasn't supposed to be there, but her friend's organization needed extra volunteers that night, and she stepped in without hesitation. Her job was simple: check in guests, guide them to their tables, help coordinate the silent auction. Will, on the other hand, was an honored donor. He walked in surrounded by business partners, his tailored suit perfect, his expression carefully neutral. He looked like someone who belonged on the cover of Fortune: sharp jaw, crisp posture, eyes that studied every room before he stepped fully inside. Sally noticed him first, only because he stood out like a statue among moving people. She immediately assumed he was unapproachable, too polished, too intense, too corporate. Will noticed her next, not because she tried to stand out, not because she sparkled, but because she smiled. A real smile, warm, unforced. A smile that softened the stiffness around his chest the moment he saw it. She handed him a program booklet and said, "Welcome, table 14 is to your right." Her voice carried Atlanta warmth, not sugary, not exaggerated, just genuine. Will felt something shift. He extended his hand. She shook it. And for the first time in his adult life, a greeting didn't feel transactional. Throughout the night, he caught glimpses of her, fixing a centerpiece, helping an elderly donor find her seat, comforting a nervous teen speaker backstage. She moved like someone who cared without thinking twice. During the silent auction, his pen wouldn't work. Sally appeared with a fresh one before he even asked. "You looked like you were about to fight that poor pen," she teased. He laughed, a real laugh, surprising even himself. "I had no idea I was that easy to read." "You're easier than you think," she replied. That single line stuck with him for months. Later, when dessert was served and the band began playing, Will approached her again. "You're volunteering?" he asked. "Yes. For the experience or the cause?" "Both," she said. "Experiences change, causes stay." The simplicity of her answer stunned him. He asked her for a dance. She hesitated, only for a second, before placing her hand in his. Under the amber lights of the ballroom, something clicked. She felt grounded. He felt weightless. The world faded. They moved together effortlessly. From that night forward, he couldn't stop thinking about her smile, and she couldn't stop remembering how his hand felt, gentle but steady, on her lower back. Their chemistry wasn't loud. It was steady, magnetic, immediate, a connection neither expected, a meeting that would eventually lead to vows, heartbreak, twins, and a second chance at 30,000 feet. Their dating phase was a beautiful mix of two very different worlds learning how to fit together. Will introduced Sally to fine dining restaurants with linen tablecloths and chefs who described dishes like works of art. Sally introduced Will to backyard cookouts where everyone brought a dish and nobody needed reservations. Will bought her flowers in crystal vases. Sally bought him sneakers so he'd stop walking everywhere in dress shoes. He showed her Boston winters. She showed him Atlanta summers. They spent hours learning each other. He learned she couldn't start her day without checking in on her mom. She learned he didn't know how to rest without feeling guilty. He learned she loved jazz nights, not concerts. She learned he slept lightly, waking at every small noise. He learned she wasn't afraid of silence. She learned he filled silence to avoid discomfort. Their differences fascinated them. Sally took him to her neighborhood church one Sunday. He felt out of place at first. People hugged, laughed, talked openly, but Sally held his hand, grounding him. By the end of the service, he found himself smiling more than he had in years. Will introduced her to a charity board dinner in Boston. The room felt stiff, formal, controlled. Sally held her own, speaking with sincerity that softened even the most rigid donors. Will watched her move with grace, amazed by her adaptability. They shared deep conversations about their dreams, fears, family expectations, the kind of home they wanted someday. Their love grew not because they were similar, but because they balanced each other. She melted his edges. He steadied her ambitions. She brought warmth into his life. He brought structure into hers. Their cultures didn't clash, they blended. Sure, they argued occasionally. She felt he worked too much. He felt she didn't understand the pressure he carried. But every disagreement ended with effort, not distance. They learned to kiss through conflict. They learned to forgive fast. They learned to choose each other daily. This was the era where love bloomed effortlessly, before careers tightened their schedules, before expectations suffocated communication, before pride clouded their connection. They were tender then, careful, hopeful, both trusting the future more than they feared it. If they only knew how much that future would test them. The proposal happened in Central Park on a mild spring evening, when tulips were in full bloom and the city felt unusually gentle. Will planned every detail carefully. He hired a small jazz trio to play her favorite melody. He reserved a private rowboat on the lake. He had a ring custom-made, simple, elegant, reflecting her, not his family's expectations. He even rehearsed his speech in the mirror like a nervous teenager. Sally didn't expect anything. She thought they were going out for a walk before dinner. But when they reached the lake, she noticed the musicians. She noticed the rowboat. She noticed how nervous Will looked, hands fidgeting, jaw tense, eyes softer than usual. "Will, what are you doing?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. He simply helped her into the boat and rowed them to the center of the water, where the reflections of city lights shimmered. Then he stopped rowing. His hands shook as he reached into his jacket pocket. "Sally," he said, voice raw in a way she had never heard before. "Before you, my world made sense but didn't feel like anything. You gave it feeling. You gave me something I didn't know how to ask for." Her eyes filled immediately. "You taught me how to love," he continued. "And you taught me I'm worth loving. I don't want a life that moves without you." He opened the ring box. Sally gasped. Tears spilled. "Marry me," Will whispered. "Please." She nodded before he finished the sentence. He slid the ring onto her finger. She threw her arms around him. The musicians played louder. Tourists clapped from the shore. Will kissed her in a way that promised forever. It was magical, perfect, storybook, but beneath the beauty of that moment, small cracks were already forming, cracks they didn't yet recognize. Will planned everything alone, in secret, instead of communicating openly. Sally felt speechless joy, but also fear about entering his high-pressure world. Will believed love alone would fix his emotional restraint. Sally believed effort alone would soften his work habits. Neither realized how differently they interpreted partnership. Neither understood how much pressure awaited them. Neither grasped that love was the easy part. Staying connected, that would become the challenge. But on that night, under spring blossoms and city lights, none of that mattered. They were two hopeful souls making a promise neither knew how to protect. And those cracks, silent, subtle, invisible, would one day widen into a separation neither truly wanted. From the outside, Will and Sally looked perfect. The successful Bostonaire and the grounded Atlanta girl who carried sunshine into every room. People thought love alone would erase all differences. But love wasn't the problem. Their worlds were. The tension didn't show up at once. It started quietly. Like small paper cuts neither of them noticed until the sting deepened. When Sally visited Boston for the first time as Will's fiancée, the atmosphere felt different immediately. His parents' home was cold, not in temperature, but in tone. Everything had rules, structure, expectations. Even conversations were measured, calculated, rehearsed. Eleanor, Will's mother, greeted her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're the young woman from Atlanta?" she asked, as if Sally were a brochure instead of a person. "Yes, ma'am," Sally responded kindly. "What community work do you do again?" Sally explained her non-profit dream, how she planned to build centers for teens needing mentorship. Eleanor nodded once and replied, "Very noble," a polite insult wrapped in elegance. Will didn't notice the shift in the air. Sally did. At dinner, Eleanor adjusted her silverware and asked Will's father, "Do you think the board will take her seriously?" People talk. Appearances matter. Sally kept her eyes on her plate, heart sinking. Will stared at his mother, stunned, but he didn't defend Sally. He didn't disagree either. He froze. That silence pierced deeper than words. More subtle comments followed in the months ahead. "Your accent is charming," Eleanor would say, while clearly judging it. "Your family is very lively," she said after meeting Sally's relatives on Zoom. "I hope you're prepared for the responsibilities of marrying into a legacy." Each comment was a reminder that Sally didn't fit the mold. Sally's world was built on community. Will's world was built on reputation. Sally valued presence. Will was trained to value perception. It wasn't hate. It was pressure. Pressure Sally never asked for, pressure Will never questioned, pressure that slowly diluted the joy between them. When they attended business dinners, donors would ask Sally if she was the entertainment coordinator, assuming she couldn't possibly be the billionaire fiancé. At charity events, she noticed people looking twice at her hand in Will's, their eyes evaluating her as though she were a resume. Will brushed off her discomfort. "People don't mean anything by it," he told her. But they did, and Sally felt every ounce of it. Her community embraced Will wholeheartedly when they visited Atlanta, even when he seemed awkward and out of place. Yet his world didn't extend the same grace. The deeper they stepped into engagement, the less Will saw the invisible weight Sally carried, and the more Sally felt like she wasn't marrying a man, she was marrying an entire system, one she didn't know how to survive. At first, Sally told herself things would get better once they married. She believed love would bridge the gap, that Will's distance was temporary, just stress from preparing to launch his company. But the long hours didn't fade. In fact, they multiplied. Their first year of marriage was swallowed by Will's schedule. Early mornings, late nights, missed dinners, cancelled dates, endless calls, emergency meetings. Sally ate alone more nights than she could count. Some evenings, she'd fall asleep on the couch waiting for him, only to wake at 2 a.m. to the sound of his laptop snapping shut. "Go to bed," he'd say softly. "Yes," she would answer, even though she had been waiting hours just to talk to him. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't dismissive on purpose. He was simply consumed. Work became his life raft, and Sally was left swimming alone. When she tried to open up, Will responded with logic instead of empathy. "I'm building something for us," he said. "This is temporary." But temporary became routine. The rare nights they shared dinner, Will spent half the meal checking emails or brainstorming. Strategies aloud, never noticing the way Sally quieted, shrinking into silence bit by bit. She stopped asking him to take breaks. She stopped telling him she missed him. She stopped pointing out the loneliness she felt creeping in, because every time she did, he'd sigh heavily or rub his temples, and she didn't want to become another source of pressure, so she endured it quietly. She kissed him goodnight, even when he barely registered the kiss. She made breakfast for him, even when he rushed out before touching it. She celebrated his accomplishments, even when he forgot to ask about hers. One night, after waiting for him for hours, she whispered to herself, "This isn't marriage, this is proximity." She didn't stop loving him. She just stopped feeling loved. Silence became their language. Distance became their rhythm. Loneliness became her normal. And Will, blindly convinced that his grind would secure their future, never noticed the foundation cracking beneath them, until it was too late. Sally didn't plan the timing. The world decided for her. She found out she was pregnant on a Tuesday morning, staring at the positive test in their bathroom while the city hummed outside. Her heart raced with a mix of fear and joy. She imagined Will kneeling beside her, smiling, lifting her into his arms. She imagined emotional warmth, shock, excitement, togetherness. She imagined a moment worthy of their love story. But reality had other plans. That evening, she tried 3 times to tell him. Each time, Will was on a call. When he finally hung up, she whispered, "Will, can we talk?" "Later," he said, rubbing his temples. "I'm exhausted." She nodded, swallowing her disappointment. 2 days passed. On Friday night, she couldn't hold it any longer. She placed the test inside a small gift box and approached him while he typed furiously at his desk. "Can we talk now?" she asked softly. He didn't look up. "Can it wait?" "No," she said, voice shaking. "I need you." That made him turn. She handed him the box. His brows furrowed as he opened it. The test lay inside, clear as day. Will's entire face changed, not in anger, but in shock. Raw, unfiltered alarm spread across his expression. "Sally, I'm not ready for this," he stammered. Her heart cracked instantly. He stood quickly, pacing. "My company launches in 4 months. Investors are watching everything I do. This is terrible timing. We have so much instability." She felt her breath tighten. "Terrible timing?" she whispered. "I'm trying to think logically," he said, running a hand through his hair. "We're under pressure. We barely see each other. And a baby right now, Sally, this is huge." Her voice trembled. "It should be huge in a good way." He froze. But he didn't step toward her. He didn't reassure her. He didn't hold her. All he said was, "We need to be realistic." Realistic. The words slammed into her chest like ice. Tears filled her eyes, but Will didn't notice, his mind spiraling through. Logistics, investors, timelines, public image, financial projections. Not fatherhood, not joy, not love. Just pressure. Sally backed away. She had hoped he would wrap her in his arms. Instead, he wrapped himself in fear, and that fear was enough to push her closer to the breaking point that would end their marriage. 2 weeks after the pregnancy reveal, when Sally was still processing, the cold reaction she received, a knock sounded on their door. It was Eleanor. Sally hesitated to let her in, but politeness won. Eleanor stepped inside, holding a sleek black envelope. "I'll be brief," she said, closing the door behind her. "I'm here because I care about my son's future." Sally stiffened. Eleanor continued, "You're expecting, and while I admire your resilience, this is not the right time for Will." Sally's jaw tightened. "He's the father. He has a right to know his child." Eleanor's expression didn't change. No shock, no warmth, just calculation. "He's under immense pressure. A baby will derail him. He doesn't need a family right now. He needs focus." Sally felt nausea rising. Eleanor placed the envelope on the table. Inside, a check. Life-changing money. Enough to start fresh. "This is not an insult," Eleanor claimed. "It's an opportunity. You can build your life without the burden of Will's stress, and he can move forward without complications." Sally felt frozen in place. A bribe, a buyout, a request to erase herself from Will's life, and the life of her unborn child. Sally whispered, "You think I want your money?" Eleanor replied calmly, "Everyone wants security." Sally pushed the envelope back. "Not like this." Eleanor didn't flinch. "Sally, if you stay, he will resent you. If you leave, he will respect your choice." Sometimes leaving is an act of mercy. Those words burned into Sally's mind. Leave him so he succeeds. Leave him so he doesn't drown. Leave him because you're the disruption. When Eleanor left, Sally sank to the floor and cried for over an hour. Not because she wanted to go, but because she suddenly believed staying would destroy him. Will had already shown panic at the pregnancy. Now his mother confirmed what Sally feared. He didn't think she, or the baby, fit his future. That night, Will came home late. He didn't notice her red eyes. He didn't notice her shaking hands. He kissed her forehead absent-mindedly and said, "I'm going to shower." She watched him disappear down the hallway. And in that instant, something snapped inside her. She realized she was loving a man who didn't know how to love through fear. A man who lived in a world that didn't make space for her. A man she adored, but could no longer stay beside. She packed her bags the next morning. She left the check behind. No note, no message. Just the quiet acceptance that love without safety is not love you can survive. When Will woke and found Sally gone, confusion hit first, then worry, then anger, then grief. Her closet was empty. Her dresser, the bathroom counter, gone. The only thing she left behind was her wedding ring in a small glass dish. Will felt the floor shift beneath him. He called, no answer. He texted, no reply. He drove to her mother's house, but Sally wasn't there. For 2 months he didn't know where she lived. He didn't know she was pregnant with twins. He didn't know she cried every night. He didn't know Eleanor had visited her. He didn't know the damage his silence caused. All he knew was that the woman he loved disappeared without explanation. When divorce papers arrived, he fought them at first, not legally, but emotionally. He begged her through emails she never read. He asked mutual friends if they'd heard from her. He tried to show up at community events she might attend. Nothing. She had vanished. And Will, who had never learned how to fight emotionally, didn't know how to chase someone who didn't want to be found. So he signed the divorce. Quietly, brokenly. Sally cried when she received the finalized file, but she still didn't return. She cut off contact because seeing him or hearing his voice would make staying away impossible. But she believed leaving protected him. Will drowned himself in work. Sally drowned herself in motherhood, both in pain, both pretending the other didn't exist, both lying to themselves about moving on. And for 2 years, their lives remained parallel lines, never touching, until one airplane seat changed everything. When Sally fled Boston, she didn't run towards something. She ran home. Atlanta held the pieces of the woman she once was, and she needed those pieces to breathe again. When she arrived at her mother's doorstep, suitcase in hand and heart in shreds, her mom didn't ask a single question. She simply opened her arms and pulled Sally into a hug so warm it cracked something open inside her. Sally broke down, silently at first, then uncontrollably, releasing weeks of pressure she had held alone. Her mother whispered, "You're safe. You're home." That night, Sally slept in her childhood room, surrounded by posters, from her teenage years and the faint scent of old lavender spray. For the first time in months, she didn't wake up to the cold emptiness of their Boston condo. She woke to the smell of grits cooking downstairs, gospel music humming softly through the kitchen, and the familiar comfort of community. Her neighbors, the aunties who practically raised her, came by with casseroles, blankets, and unsolicited advice. They didn't pry. They simply said, "Baby, we're here. You don't have to explain anything. You're gonna rise again." Their unconditional support soothed some of the wounds we'll never saw. As the pregnancy progressed, Sally leaned into the strength of Atlanta's village. Her mother went with her to every doctor appointment. Her cousins cleaned the house when morning sickness left her drained. Church members dropped off fresh fruit and prenatal vitamins. Atlanta wrapped her in warmth. It didn't ask for explanations. It didn't judge her choices. It didn't care about Boston legacies or social pressure. Her community simply held her up when she couldn't stand on her own. But at night, When the house was quiet and the world settled into stillness, Sally would place her hand on her belly and whisper, "You'll be loved." Even if it's just by me. She didn't know they would be twins yet. She didn't know her life was about to multiply with equal parts joy and difficulty. Atlanta became her healing space and the foundation for the next chapter of her life. Sally learned she was carrying twins during her second trimester. The doctor smiled softly and said, "2 heartbeats, 2 little miracles." She laughed through her tears, part joy, part fear, part disbelief. But with the joy came complications. Carrying twins meant intense fatigue, swelling, back pain that made her cry at night, constant monitoring, higher risks. Sally found herself in the hospital more often than she ever expected. Blood pressure spikes, dizzy spells, sharp cramps that terrified her, doctors urging rest she couldn't always afford. Her mother became her rock, driving her to appointments, cooking meals, rubbing her back when the pain surged. But even with support, Sally felt alone in the quiet moments when fear crawled into her thoughts. Some nights she cried silently, one hand gripping the sheets, the other cradling her stomach, whispering, "Hold on for me. Please, hold on." She thought about Will constantly, what his reaction would have been, whether he would have held her hand during ultrasounds, whether he would have rubbed her feet when the swelling became unbearable, whether he would have pressed his ear to her belly to hear the kicks. But she kept all those thoughts buried. She convinced herself she wasn't allowed to miss him. When labor came early, far earlier than she expected, panic rushed through her body. Her mother sped to the hospital, praying under her breath, holding Sally's hand as contractions hit like waves. There were moments when Sally thought she would faint, moments when she begged the nurses, "Just tell me they're okay," moments when she wanted Will beside her more than anything. Hours later, the first baby girl arrived, tiny, red-faced, crying with surprising strength. Minutes later, her sister followed, smaller, calmer, with bright blue eyes that instantly mirrored Will. Sally cried harder at the sight of them than she had her entire pregnancy. "Joy," her mother whispered, kissing the first twin. "And hope," she said, touching the second. The names were perfect. These little girls were everything she needed, proof that beauty could emerge from heartbreak. That love could grow even in broken soil, that strength could bloom in silence. Holding them for the first time, Sally whispered to both, "You saved me." Their small fingers curled around hers, anchoring her to a future she never planned, but desperately needed. Raising twins was beautiful. Raising twins alone was exhausting. Sally quickly learned, 2 babies cry at the same time. 2 babies need feeding at the same time. And sleep, the kind that lasted more than 45 minutes, became a myth. There were days the house felt too loud. Nights, the silence felt too heavy. Moments she nearly collapsed from fatigue. Sleep deprivation pushed her to tears more times than she admitted. Bills stacked up. Baby formula cost more than she expected. Her old savings shrank fast. She worked part-time shifts where she could, often bringing the girls to her mother's during late evenings. But Sally was determined. She refused to break. She refused to complain. She refused to let struggle define her children's start in life. Little by little she rebuilt herself. She took online classes when the girls napped. She applied for grants to start the youth program she always dreamed of. She accepted help when neighbors offered to babysit. She learned how to stretch every dollar without shame. She developed a schedule, chaotic but functional, and in the middle of the chaos, she rediscovered the best parts of herself, her strength, her empathy, her purpose, her identity outside heartbreak. The twins grew quickly, laughing loudly, hugging tightly, toddling through the living room with wobbly legs. Their joy made the hard days worth it. They were her world, her motivation, her second chance at life. And yet, despite all the progress she made, one wound never healed. She still missed Will, not because she needed a man, not because she couldn't survive without him, but because the love they once shared still lived quietly inside her, tucked behind the anger, buried beneath the pain, suppressed beneath pride. She just didn't say it out loud. Late at night, after the twins fell asleep, and the house settled into quiet hums, Sally would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, fighting memories she wished would fade. She missed the way Will leaned into her when he was tired. She missed the softness in his voice during early mornings. She missed the hope they once carried, the plans they once made. She missed him. One night, overwhelmed and restless, she grabbed a notebook and began writing him a letter, not to send, but to release the ache building inside her. Will, you should have been here tonight. Hope took her first steps. She wrote pages, sometimes angry words, sometimes longing, sometimes forgiveness she wasn't ready to admit. She wrote letters when the girls cried non-stop, when she felt lonely, when she remembered their first dance, when she wondered what he was doing on the other side of the country. Dozens of unsent letters filled a small box under her bed. Letters like, "Do you ever think of me? I'm scared I made the wrong choice. You would love them. They look like you when they smile. I still dream about you. I'm sorry for breaking us." Writing became therapy, a confession booth without judgment, a way to hold him without reaching out, a way to love him without reopening wounds. Some nights she cried as she wrote. Some nights she smiled at memories she wished she could erase but couldn't. But every night she ended her letters the same way. "I hope you're okay," even when her heart wasn't. Everyone assumed Sally stayed silent because she was angry. But anger was only a sliver of the truth. Her real reasons were far heavier. 1. Pride. Sally feared reaching out would confirm Eleanor's words, that she was a burden, a distraction, someone who would derail his success. She never wanted Will to feel trapped by responsibility. 2. Fear. She feared Will wouldn't want the babies. His panicked reaction to the first pregnancy haunted her. She feared hearing disappointment in his voice. She feared rejection, not for herself, but for her daughters. 3. Misunderstanding and assumptions. She believed Will didn't want a family at that time. She believed his silence during their marriage reflected his deeper priorities. She believed he would choose his company over the girls. She believed she was protecting him. 4. Unhealed heartbreak. Every time she imagined calling him, her chest tightened. The wounds were too fresh, the memories too raw, the love too deep. 5. Belief that she was doing the right thing. She convinced herself that raising them alone was the safest path for everyone. Less pressure for him, less tension for her, less chaos for the babies. She whispered many nights, "If he wanted me, he would look for me." She didn't know he had looked. She didn't know he was broken too. She didn't know he was walking around Boston with a quiet ache he couldn't explain. She didn't know fate had plans for them, plans that would crash into their laps at 30,000 feet. When Sally left, Will didn't just lose a wife. He lost the last piece of softness in his life. At first, he waited for her to return. Then he waited for a call, then a text, then anything. But silence filled every space she once occupied. He slept on the couch for weeks, unable to walk past their shared bedroom without feeling punched in the chest. Her side of the closet empty, her scent fading from the sheets, her laugh no longer bouncing around the kitchen. Every room felt like a wound. Work became his survival mechanism. He took on projects he didn't need to take. He stayed in the office until sunrise. He drank more coffee than water. He ignored every message from friends urging him to take a break. At board meetings, he was sharper. In negotiations, he was relentless. But behind closed doors, he was hollow. Food lost taste. Sleep lost meaning. Life lost color. His team assumed he was motivated, but grief was the engine powering his every move. He rearranged his schedule so he wouldn't be home during the hours Sally used to cook dinner. He filled weekends with work trips to avoid remembering their Saturday routines, lazy mornings. Pancakes, her humming while cleaning, his arms around her waist while she cooked. He deleted her contact twice, restored it twice, stared at her number more times than he could count. But every time, fear whispered, "What if she doesn't want you anymore?" Instead of reaching for healing, he reached for work. Work wouldn't leave him. Work wouldn't reject him. Work wouldn't walk out with no explanation. But work couldn't love him. And without Sally, love wasn't something he knew how to feel anymore. When Sally vanished, Will didn't initially suspect pregnancy. He suspected heartbreak. He suspected exhaustion, but not this. It wasn't until months later, when he found the empty gift box she had left in there, bedroom drawer, a box he didn't remember opening, that something clicked inside him. Memory returned in fragments, her trembling hands, his overwhelmed reaction. The look in her eyes when he said terrible timing, it hit him like a blow. She had been pregnant. He sat on the edge of their bed, holding the box in both hands, whispering, "No, no, please tell me I didn't push you away." Guilt clawed at his chest. Why hadn't he looked for her harder? Why hadn't he recognized the signs? Why had he let fear speak louder than love? He couldn't ask her. He didn't know where she was. He didn't know how far she ran. His mind spiraled into the most painful conclusion. She must have lost the baby. Every sign pointed to it. Her sudden disappearance, her refusal to respond, the divorce papers with no explanation. He convinced himself she was grieving alone because he hadn't created a safe space for vulnerability. He believed she blamed him. He believed she hated him for not being excited. He believed he was the reason she disappeared. And because he believed the baby didn't survive, he carried that weight every single day. At night, lying alone in the dark, he whispered apologies into the silence. "I failed you. I should have been better. I'm sorry for not showing joy when you needed it most." The grief of losing a child he never met, and never knew how to mourn, became a permanent ache under his ribs. He didn't know he had 2 daughters alive. He didn't know they were thriving. He didn't know one had his exact blue eyes. He didn't know the truth had been living in Atlanta this whole time. Eleanor had always been poised, elegant, and powerful. But Will's grief sharpened his perception. One afternoon, she invited him to lunch. She ordered for both of them, as she always did. But Will pushed the plate away. "You talked to Sally before she left," he said, voice steady but cold. A pause, a crack in Eleanor's composure. "I spoke to her as any concerned mother would," she replied. Will stiffened. "You pushed her away. William, she wasn't a fit for our world." He leaned forward. "She was my wife. She would have held you back. She was the only thing holding me together." Eleanor blinked, surprised by his tone. Will stood. "I'm done letting you interfere in my life." "William, I lost her," he said, voice breaking. "And maybe I could have fought harder, but I will never forgive anyone who made her feel unwelcome." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his fist. He simply walked away, and he didn't look back. From that moment, he separated himself from the elite social circles his family worshipped. No more fundraisers. No more polished charity dinners. No more curated public image. He fired the PR consultant who told him a divorce would look bad. He declined invitations from partners who treated women like accessories. He sold the Boston condo that held too many memories. He shed every piece of the world that contributed to losing Sally. He didn't know she had never wanted him to choose between her and his world. She only wanted space in it. The relocation wasn't meant to change his life. It was meant to fix his business. Will's company had been expanding rapidly, and after 3 years of research, Atlanta emerged as the ideal headquarters. Booming tech sector, affordable cost for employees, diverse talent pool, strong community engagement opportunities. Will approved the move without hesitation. He wanted a fresh start, a city without memories, a place far from Boston's suffocating expectations. What he didn't realize was that fate had quietly been arranging a perfect collision. His new headquarters would be 15 minutes from Sally's mother's house, 10 minutes from the park where she took the twins every weekend, 5 minutes from the grocery store she shopped at, 2 minutes from the pediatric clinic the twins visited. Their lives were running parallel again, not touching yet, but closer than either could imagine. His team moved in phases: furniture, equipment, hiring, networking. Will flew back and forth, constantly overseeing progress. Every trip to Atlanta felt different. He couldn't explain why. He felt lighter here, like the air didn't carry the same grief, like the city held a warmth he desperately needed. He never knew that warmth was tied to the woman he still loved, and the daughters he didn't know existed. The morning of the flight, Will didn't plan to be there. He was supposed to fly back to Boston 2 days earlier, but storms delayed construction inspections at the new HQ. Then, a software glitch pushed meetings into the evening. Then his driver called out sick, forcing him to call a rideshare last minute. Then traffic on I-85 slowed to a crawl, causing him to miss his original seat assignment. By the time he arrived at Hartsfield-Jackson, the only flight left had one available seat in economy, a seat he hadn't sat in for years. He didn't care. He just needed to get home. The universe nudged him again when a gate agent asked, "Do you mind switching seats so a mom can sit closer to her kids?" Will sighed and said, "Fine." That fine rewrote every chapter of his life. Because that mom was Sally. Those kids were his daughters. That plane was the intersection of every heartbreak, every mistake, every second chance waiting to unfold. When Sally stepped onto the plane holding two toddlers, Will's heart didn't beat. It crashed. He thought grief was the end of their story, but fate was just clearing space for the beginning of a new one. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't luck. This wasn't random. This was divine alignment. This was the moment everything fractured so everything could finally heal. San Francisco changed Will in ways he didn't expect. He originally flew there for work meetings, but after the plane encounter, after the reveal, after learning the girls were his, nothing in him felt the same. He couldn't look at a skyline, a street, or a hotel room without thinking about what he had almost lost forever. Sally agreed, carefully, cautiously, to let him spend the trip getting to know the girls, and Will treated every second like it was holy ground. The first morning in the hotel, he woke before sunrise, too excited to sleep. He stood by the crib the airline provided, watching joy and hope stir awake with tiny stretches and soft babbles. Their innocence nearly knocked the air out of him. When Hope opened her bright blue eyes, eyes that mirrored his exactly, Will felt something bloom in his chest, something warm and fierce. "Hi, sweetheart," he whispered. She reached for his tie. Joy woke next, grabbing his finger with surprising strength. "Da," she mumbled. "Not Dada. Not Daddy. Just Da." It shattered him in the gentlest way. Later, he fed them breakfast, clumsily but determined. Applesauce ended up on his shirt, Cheerios in his hair. Hope sneezed yogurt onto his watch. Joy smacked the spoon from his hand, giggling. He didn't care. For once, he wasn't thinking about deadlines, shareholders, or public image. He was thinking about which stuffed animal Hope preferred, why Joy laughed harder when he pretended to sneeze, how tiny their socks were, how soft their curls felt, how he had lived without them. He carried them through Golden Gate Park in a double stroller, pausing every few minutes because one wanted a snack and the other wanted to be held. He didn't rush. He didn't complain. He soaked in every second. They napped on his chest that afternoon, one girl on each shoulder, and for the first time in years, Will didn't feel empty. He felt full, complete, like fatherhood wasn't new, just delayed. Sally didn't expect what she saw. She expected awkwardness, uncertainty, fumbling. Instead, she saw transformation. Will didn't just help with the girls, he immersed himself. He asked questions. What time do they usually nap? What calms them during teething? Should I burp them after every ounce or every two? Which one hates the car seat? How do you tell their cries apart? He wasn't trying to impress her. He genuinely wanted to learn. He carried diaper bags, mixed formula, wiped faces, changed diapers, pinned back his sleeves, and accepted every mess and mishap with quiet patience. Sally watched him with a mix of surprise and something softer, a warmth she tried to swallow down. She had never seen him this gentle, not even when they were married. She realized something painful and beautiful at once. He wasn't the same man she left. The weight of grief had reshaped him. The years apart had humbled him. The twins had awakened a tenderness she once begged for. At one point, Joy tripped over her own shoes and started crying. Before Sally could move, Will was there, scooping her up, checking her knees, soothing her with soft whispers. "It's okay, baby girl. I'm right here." Sally froze. That tone, protective, nurturing, unconditional, was new, and it cracked open a door in her heart she wasn't ready to open, but couldn't ignore either. She caught herself staring at him as he played with the girls on the hotel carpet, making toy animals talk, smiling without hesitation, letting the twins climb all over him. He didn't look like a billionaire. He didn't look like the stressed, overworked husband she left behind. He looked like a father. And for the first time, Sally wondered, did I leave too soon? Did we both make mistakes we didn't know how to fix? Trust didn't return instantly, but something shifted. Her walls were still up, high, strong, protective, but they weren't made of stone anymore. They were beginning to crack. Their San Francisco days quickly developed a rhythm, an unexpected one, a comforting one, a family one. They visited the pier, letting the twins watch the sea lions bark and slide into the water. Joy squealed every time one flopped onto the rocks, while Hope clung to Will's shoulder with wide-eyed fascination. Sally captured the moment on her phone. Will holding the girls close, smiling softly as sunlight hit his face. She didn't mean to take the picture. Her hand just reacted. Her heart just reacted. Later, they ate lunch at a small cafe near Fisherman's Wharf. The twins mashed avocado into the high-chair trays while Will cut their fruit into tiny pieces, checking each bite like a trained expert. Sally watched him again. How naturally he fit into the role she once thought he'd never embrace. At the park, the twins toddled between them, holding their parents' fingers. Anyone passing by would assume they were a united family, not two people with years of broken history between them. There were moments when Sally forgot the pain, moments when they laughed again, moments when she saw hints of the young man she fell in love with. At one point, they sat on a bench while the girls played in the grass. Sally whispered, "They adore you." Will swallowed hard. "I adore them." She glanced at him. "You're doing well. You mean, as a father?" She nodded. He looked out at the twins, voice low. "I didn't know I could love like this." Her breath hitched. His honesty always did that to her. A soft breeze moved between them, carrying a silence that wasn't tense, but tender. Healing didn't happen in words. It happened in moments like this, small stitches pulling a torn bond back together. It happened on the fourth night. The twins fell asleep earlier than usual, exhausted from exploring the city. Sally stepped onto the hotel balcony to get some air, wrapped in a thin sweater. The sky was dark but calm, lights from the streets below reflecting off her face. Will joined her quietly. For a moment, they simply stood there, side by side, breathing in the cool air, listening to distant traffic, sharing a space that felt fragile and intimate. "You've changed," Sally said softly. "So have you," Will replied. She smiled faintly. "Motherhood will do that." He nodded. "Fatherhood, too." A pause. "I didn't know I had it in me," he admitted, being gentle, being present. "I didn't know I could be this man." "You always could," she whispered. "You just didn't let yourself." His eyes softened. "I wish I had been him sooner. For you. For them." Sally looked down, her chest tightening. "Will, I don't know what any of this means yet." "I'm not asking for anything," he said gently. "Not pressure, not a promise. Just this moment." She dared to look up, and that was the mistake, or the fate, or the opening neither expected. Because the moment their eyes met, something electric moved through the air. Memories, chemistry, the gravity of two people who were once each other's safe space. Will stepped closer, slowly, carefully, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. He lifted a hand to her cheek, brushing away a loose curl. Her breath caught, her lashes fluttered. "Sally," he whispered. Years of longing, regret, and buried love condensed into 1 second. And she leaned in. Their lips met, soft at first, then deeper, fuller. The kind of kiss that wasn't about passion but history. About everything they lost and everything they hadn't stopped feeling. Sally pulled back first, breath trembling. "That wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. Will whispered, "It was always going to happen." Her heart pounded. She turned away, shoulders shaking, not in fear, but in overwhelm. He touched her gently. "No rush," he said. "We do this your way." She nodded without looking at him, but he didn't need to see her face to know. A door inside her had reopened. The next morning, everything felt different. Not lighter, not confusing, just real. Sally woke before the twins and sat at the small dining table with a cup of tea, thinking about everything. The kiss, the old love resurfacing, the new father Will had become, the fear of repeating their past, the responsibility of protecting the girls. Will approached quietly. "Can we talk?" he asked. She nodded. He sat across from her, hands clasped, posture not confident, but vulnerable. "I don't want to rush you," he began. "And I don't want to repeat the mistakes we made before." Sally listened, heart steady but cautious. "I want to try again," he said. Not blindly, not quickly, intentionally, carefully. Her throat tightened. "But only," he continued, "if you want that too." She sighed softly. "Will, I'm scared." "I am too. I don't trust easily anymore." "I know," he said, "and I don't expect instant trust. I just want a chance to earn it." Her eyes glistened. "And the girls?" she asked. "They come first, always. No matter where we stand." That mattered to her more than he realized. She took a breath. "Let's start as co-parents," she said. "Real co-parents. Shared responsibility, shared decisions, shared time." He nodded immediately. "Absolutely. And then, if things feel right, if we both grow at the same pace." She paused. "Maybe we see what's possible again." Will didn't smile in triumph. He smiled in gratitude. "That's more than I deserve," he whispered. "It's what we both deserve," she corrected softly. They agreed on schedules, communication habits, boundaries and expectations. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't impulsive. It was thoughtful. And for the first time, their cooperation felt like partnership, not pressure. When the twins woke and ran into the room, giggling and climbing into their parents' laps, Sally looked at the four of them together and felt a flicker of something she thought she lost forever: hope. The return flight to Atlanta felt completely different from the flight that changed everything. On the way to San Francisco, Will sat furious, blindsided, carrying years of resentment he didn't know how to release. But now, coming back, he carried something new: hope, responsibility, fear of messing things up again. Sally sat beside the twins, helping them with snacks while Will stole little glances at them, still amazed that these two tiny humans belonged to him. He didn't reach for Sally's hand. He didn't crowd her space. He simply existed beside her with quiet respect. Just another step in rebuilding trust. When the plane landed, the humid Atlanta air wrapped around them the moment they stepped outside. Sally's family, her mother Diane, her grandmother Lily Mae, and her younger brother Marcus, stood waiting by the arrival area, waving excitedly. Will froze. These were the people who held Sally when she had no one, the people who wiped her tears, watched her belly grow, and rocked his babies to sleep. Sally's mother approached first, a proud Southern woman with warm but discerning eyes. She didn't rush into a hug. She looked at Will from head to toe, studying him the way only a mother protecting her child could. "Mr. Harrington," she said evenly. Will swallowed. "Ma'am, thank you for taking care of them." The words weren't rehearsed. They weren't polished. They were raw, and Diane heard it. She nodded slowly. "We do what we must for family." Sally stood beside him, nervous but steady. Her grandmother, Lily Mae, small, elegant, and sharper than anyone anticipated, walked straight up, eyes narrowing. "So," she said, hands on her hips, "you finally showed up." Will bowed his head in deep respect. "I'm sorry I wasn't there sooner." She squinted. "Don't tell me that. Tell them babies." Then her expression softened. "But you came. That counts." Marcus was the last to step up, arms crossed. "You hurt my sister," he said, no emotion in his tone. "I know," Will replied, "and I'm here to make it right, step by step." Marcus stared at him for a long moment, then said, "We'll see." Despite the tension, the meeting didn't explode. It didn't implode. It settled. Like dust after a storm, Sally watched them interact, and although she didn't smile, a quiet relief washed through her. This was the first bridge, and Will crossed it humbly. Before the plane encounter, Will rarely spoke to his father's side of the family. Decades of cold expectations, rigid decorum, and social pressure created distance he never bothered to fix. But everything shifted now. When word reached Aunt Caroline, his late father's sister, that he had twins he never knew about, she requested to meet them. Requested was unusual for her. She normally summoned people. Sally hesitated, but Will asked gently, "They're not like my mother. Please, let's see what she wants." They met at a quiet garden restaurant in Buckhead. Aunt Caroline arrived in a navy wrap dress, pearls, and an expression Sally couldn't read. But when she saw the twins, her stern posture immediately softened. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, covering her mouth. "William, they're beautiful." Hope reached for the brooch on Caroline's chest. Joy blinked shyly. Caroline looked at Sally next. "You raised them well," she said, sincerity clear. "I'm sorry you had to do it alone." Sally didn't expect kindness from Will's side of the family, not after everything his mother did. But Caroline's tone carried no malice. "Thank you," Sally replied. Caroline continued gently, "Your union wasn't welcomed by everyone. But some of us saw the love. We saw how he looked at you. We knew he wasn't himself after the divorce." Will stiffened but didn't speak. Caroline took a breath. "I cannot undo the past, but I can choose to be present now. If you'll allow me, I'd like to be part of the girls' lives." Sally and Will exchanged a startled look. Sally spoke carefully. "As long as everything stays respectful, of course." Caroline nodded. She leaned forward, touching Joy's hand. "You have family here, real family." The statement hit Will hard. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't standing alone. It wasn't a full reconciliation with his entire family. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't forced. It was one open door, and it mattered more than he expected. Now that they were in the same city, CO parenting stopped being theoretical. It became real, and real meant learning. Quickly, Will insisted on taking the girls twice a week and every other weekend, not because he wanted to impress Sally, but because he genuinely wanted time with them. The first few days were chaotic. Hope threw her sippy cup across his condo. Joy cried because her pajamas were itchy, which Will later learned meant she wanted the pink ones, not the purple. Bath time turned into a miniature flood. Diaper cream somehow got in Will's hair, but he stayed patient, asking Sally questions instead of pretending he knew everything. Sally, in return, learned to breathe and let go of control, something motherhood had forced her to grip tightly. They created a shared digital calendar for naps, appointments, meals, and milestones. They discussed discipline methods, bedtime routines, and exposure to Will's high-profile world. One night, when Will dropped the girls off, Sally watched them run into their room with excitement, squealing about a new toy he bought. She looked at Will. "You're getting better at this." He smiled softly. "I'm trying." Sally stepped outside for a moment of air, and Will followed. "Being their dad," he said quietly, "it's the first thing in a long time that makes me feel like a real human being again." Her heart pinched gently. "And being their mom, it's what saved me," she whispered. A stillness passed between them. Warm, comfortable, rooted in mutual respect. They weren't rushing romance. They weren't pretending everything was perfect. They were learning each other all over again, through parenting, through presence, through showing up instead of shutting down. Boundaries were established. No surprise visits. Joint decisions on major issues. No introducing new partners unless serious. Weekly family check-ins. And over time, the tension between them shifted from guarded to cooperative. Sometimes even affectionate, but careful. Always careful. One evening, after a long day, Will asked to speak privately while the twins napped. He removed his watch, something he did when the conversation was serious, and sat across from her at the kitchen table. "Sally," he said gently, "I want to contribute more. Not because you need me to, but because it's my responsibility." She froze. "I know you've done everything alone," he continued, "and I know you're proud. But the girls deserve all the support they can get." Her jaw tightened. "Will, I'm not taking handouts." "It wouldn't be a handout," he replied. "It would be partnership." She stared at him, uncomfortable. "Money was always a wedge between us," she said softly. "I don't want history repeating." "It won't," he promised. "This time, everything is transparent. Your control, your comfort level, your boundaries." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a clear financial plan. Childcare, medical coverage, education funds, and equal contributions to household needs when the girls were with him. No manipulation, no conditions, no theatrics, just responsibility. Sally looked at it for a long time. "You really thought this through?" she whispered. "I had years to think about everything," he answered quietly. She hesitated, then finally nodded. "Okay," she said. "We'll accept it, but we discuss everything together, every step." "Absolutely," he replied. She exhaled, relief, fear, gratitude blending together. For the first time, financial support didn't feel like control. It felt like partnership. It felt like sincerity. It felt like healing. The day came sooner than expected. Eleanor Harrington requested a meeting, not with Sally, not with the twins, with Will. He went alone. Her estate was exactly as he remembered, cold, pristine, curated for perfection rather than comfort. Eleanor sat in the sunroom, sipping tea, expression unreadable. "I hear you've involved yourself with Sally again," she said without greeting. Will's jaw tightened. "She's the mother of my children." "Children?" she repeated, eyebrows lifting. "Plural?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Twins, my daughters." Eleanor set her cup down. "And this is confirmed?" Will folded his arms. "I've seen them. I've held them. I don't need a test." She scoffed lightly. "You're letting emotions cloud your judgment again." He stepped closer. "Emotions didn't cloud my judgment." "You did." Her eyes narrowed. "You bribed Sally," Will said, voice low but unwavering. "You pushed her away while I was drowning in work and pressure. You manipulated both of us, and you cost me years with my children." Eleanor straightened, mask cracking. "I did what was necessary to protect our family." "You destroyed it," he shot back. A heavy silence fell. Eleanor opened her mouth to respond, but stopped when she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Strength, boundary, conviction. He continued, "I'm choosing my family now. Sally, joy, hope. If you want a relationship with me, or with them, you will treat Sally with respect. No exceptions." Eleanor's lips tightened. "And if I refuse?" Will didn't flinch. "Then you stay out of our lives." For the first time in decades, Eleanor Harrington looked genuinely shaken. Will turned toward the door. Before he reached it, she whispered something so faint he almost missed it. "I didn't think she was good enough for you." He paused, back still turned. "She was too good for me," he said. "And you drove her away." He didn't wait for a reply. He walked out of the estate, shoulders heavy, but heart lighter than it had been in years. He had chosen his real family. He had chosen accountability. He had chosen growth. And that decision, that boundary, was the twist that would reshape everything ahead. The weeks following Will's confrontation with Eleanor shifted the emotional landscape for both him and Sally. It wasn't magic. It wasn't instant. It was work. They agreed. If they were going to rebuild a life together, they needed tools they never had during their first marriage. So they walked into a quiet therapist's office tucked away in Midtown Atlanta. Soft chairs, warm lighting, no pressure. Just a space meant for honesty. The therapist, Dr. Everythi, didn't let either of them coast. "Sally," she asked during their first session, "what did you need back then that you never got?" Sally swallowed hard. "Presence, not gifts, not promises, presence. I needed a husband who saw me, not a man always trying to outrun disappointment." Will's chest tightened. "And Will," Dr. Everythi continued, "what did you need from her?" He exhaled slowly. "To know I mattered outside of my achievements, that I didn't have to earn every ounce of love." Sally blinked, surprised. "You always had my love." He shook his head gently. "I didn't know how to accept it." Week after week, they untangled old pain, miscommunication, and buried expectations. They learned how to apologize without justification, how to listen without preparing a defense, how to hold space for emotion rather than fix it, how to speak fears without shame. One session, Sally finally voiced something she'd been holding for years. "When I walked away, I wasn't just angry with you, I was angry with myself for choosing silence." Will reached for her hand, not to claim, not to convince, but to connect. "I'm grateful you told me now," he whispered. Later, during another session, Will admitted something that made Sally's eyes soften with compassion. When the girls ran toward me in San Francisco, I felt joy and grief. I realized what I missed because I let fear guide me. Dr. Avery nodded. And what do you do with that realization now? Will glanced at Sally, then spoke with clarity. I build the future I almost lost. Therapy didn't erase their past. It reframed it. It didn't rewrite their history. It gave it meaning. They walked out of each appointment with more understanding and less resentment. The foundation was forming, not rushed, not fragile, not obligated, chosen, intentional, strong. It happened on a quiet Sunday at Piedmont Park. The twins played with bubbles, chasing them across the grass while the sun sank into a warm orange glow. Sally sat on a blanket, scrolling through photos from their recent outings, smiling softly at the memories they were creating. Will watched her from a few feet away, heart pounding, not from nerves but from certainty. This time wasn't about a grand gesture, a fancy venue, or societal approval. This time was about truth, presence, and sincerity. He approached slowly, hands tucked in his pockets. Sally, she looked up. Yeah? He exhaled, gathering courage. There's something I've wanted to say for a long time, but I didn't have the right words, or the right version of myself. She sat up straighter, sensing the shift. Will knelt, not dramatically, not loudly, but gently, grounding himself in the moment. Sally gasped softly. Will, he took her hand in both of his. The first time I promised you forever, I didn't understand what forever required. I didn't understand partnership, or vulnerability, or how to love without fear whispering in my ear. His voice trembled slightly. But standing here today, after everything we've rebuilt, after seeing our daughters run, to you with joy and run to me with trust, I finally understand what love asks for. Tears welled in Sally's eyes. It asks for honesty. It asks for patience. It asks for choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. He reached into his pocket, not for a diamond, but for a simple gold band. No pressure, no expectations, no performance. Just a question that comes from the truest part of me. He looked directly into her eyes. Sally, will you marry me again? She covered her mouth as tears spilled over her cheeks. But this time, they weren't from hurt. They were from healing. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Will. I will. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Joy squealed from across the grass, thinking the bubble had popped in her hand. Hope ran toward them, shouting, Mummy, Daddy, look, more bubbles. Sally laughed through tears. We're getting married again. Hope blinked. Again? Will scooped both girls into his arms. This time, we're doing it right. Sally wrapped her arms around all three of them, and for the first time in years, the world felt complete. They didn't want extravagance. They wanted intimacy. So they chose Sally's grandmother's backyard, where azaleas bloomed along the fence line, where her childhood memories lived, where community and love always felt alive. Family gathered in foldable chairs. Neighbors brought homemade dishes. The breeze was soft, the sun gentle, the moments sacred. Sally wore a simple white dress embroidered by her grandmother. Will wore a navy suit, the same one he wore when he first held the twins in San Francisco. The ceremony blended their worlds, Southern gospel humming beneath the chatter, a violin trio playing one of Will's favorite classical pieces, homemade sweet tea beside artisan pastries, joy and hope sprinkling flower petals with serious determination. A pastor from Sally's church officiated. Marriage isn't about perfection, he said. It's about choosing grace, choosing honesty, choosing forgiveness. He invited Will to speak first. Will looked at Sally with steady eyes. I vow to show up, not just with presence, but with purpose, to listen, to grow, to protect this family with humility, not pride. I vow to choose you in the small moments, the quiet moments, and the uncertain ones. Sally's lips wobbled. Then it was her turn. I vow to trust the man you've become, not the man fear once convinced me you were. I vow to let love lead, not past hurt. I vow to stand beside you as we raise joy and hope with unity, wisdom, and patience. The twins held hands, watching their parents with wide, curious eyes, as if they understood the significance in their own little way. When the pastor said, "You may kiss your bride," Will stepped forward slowly, giving Sally space to pull away if she needed. She didn't. Their kiss wasn't rushed or dramatic. It was soft, steady, the kind of kiss two people share when they've walked through storms and chosen to rebuild something stronger. Family clapped, children giggled, and someone shouted, "About time!" It was perfect. Later that night, after food, stories, dancing and laughter filled the backyard. Will and Sally sat on the porch while the twins slept inside. The night was calm, no noise except the hum of cicadas and the weight of a life rebuilt. Sally rested her head on Will's shoulder. "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing all of this?" He nodded. "Every day. What do you think the lesson was?" she asked quietly. Will thought for a long moment. "That love can't survive on assumptions," he said. "It needs truth, even uncomfortable truth." Sally nodded slowly. "And that silence can hurt just as much as words." He turned to her, brushing a curl behind her ear. "Another lesson. Pride is the enemy of healing." She smiled softly. "And forgiveness isn't weakness, it's choosing peace." They fell into a reflective quiet before Sally added one more. "And maybe, just maybe, the hardest roads lead to the families we were meant to build." Will kissed her forehead. "I believe that now, their story wasn't about perfection. It was about growth. It was about accountability. It was about choosing love with intention, not naivete. And through their journey, viewers would learn, love survives when we confront fear, not hide behind it. Families heal when communication becomes consistent. Second chances demand humility, not entitlement. Children thrive when parents lead with unity, not resentment. Their reflections weren't lessons preached, they were lived. A few months later, their home buzzed with new routines. Breakfast chaos, daycare drop, offs, shared calendars, and laughter echoing through hallways that once felt empty. One morning, the girls ran into the kitchen wearing mismatched socks. "Daddy, Mommy, dance with us," Hope yelled. Will swept Hope into his arms. Sally lifted Joy. And soon the four of them spun around the living room, music playing. Through a small speaker, as sunlight poured through the windows. No fear, no distance, no silence, just family. Later that evening, as Will tucked the twins into bed, Joy grabbed his hand. "Daddy, don't go." He smiled softly. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart." Sally stood quietly in the doorway, tears in her eyes, not from sadness, but from gratitude. She whispered, "We made it." Will walked up, placed a hand on her cheek, and said with full certainty, "No, we started. This is just the beginning." They stood together, watching their daughters drift into sleep, their past behind them, their promise ahead. A new marriage, a new understanding, a new future shaped by healing, truth, and commitment. Their story ended not with drama, but with peace, just as it should.